Imagine a 9-year-old sitting at the kitchen table,
Okay.
and they know exactly what to say to stop their parents' screaming match from, turning into a divorce.
Right, they can just sense it.
Exactly. They just instantly modulate their voice. They offer a distraction. They soothe the mother.
They validate the father.
Yes. They validate the father. They're the ultimate peacemaker. People always call them an old soul.
Oh, definitely. The perfect, deeply responsible child.
Right, and society looks at this kid and just hands them a gold star. Teachers are always praising their maturity.
But if you actually look at what's happening underneath,
Yeah, like if we put this child into an fMRI machine, clinically speaking, we would be looking at a human being experiencing a neurological state of pure terror.
pure terror.
Their amygdala is just screaming. They are actively fighting for their survival.
It really is the ultimate invisible crisis. You
Yeah.
have this nervous system that is completely flooded with cortisol, but it's masquerading as a perfectly behaved kid.
Right, because they aren't acting out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The distress isn't externalized through tantrums or, failing grades. It is entirely internalized.
Yeah.
The child's identity has been basically hijacked to become a solution to an adult's problem.
Wow. Well, welcome to today's deep dive. If you are listening to this right now and that scenario resonated with you,
If you were that kid.
yeah, if you were the kid who never caused a problem, the one who always had to read the room, well, fair warning. Today's journey might feel a little bit like we found a hidden camera that's been recording your entire life.
It gets very real very fast.
It really does. We are taking a hard, totally unvarnished look at the psychological mechanics of parentification. What actually happens when a child is forced to emotionally parent their own caregivers?
And we're going to explore the why and the how behind this dynamic. Not just the surface level symptoms, right?
Right.
We want to look at the deep architectural changes that happen in a developing brain when it's forced to bear weight it was simply never designed to hold.
Which is heavy material. But understanding the precise mechanics of what happened to you is, it's the absolute prerequisite to untangling yourself from it.
You have to know how the knot was tied to untie it.
Perfectly said. Okay, so let's establish some ground rules here, because the material breaks parentification down into two incredibly distinct categories.
Right, there's a big difference.
Yeah, and when most people hear the term parentification, they usually picture the first category, which is instrumental parentification. I want to make sure we understand the physical reality of this before we get into the psychological weeds.
Well, instrumental parentification is, it's the narrow, literal definition.
The physical stuff.
Exactly. This is when a child is conscripted to perform actual physical parental duties. The classic clinical example we see is like a fourth grader who comes home at 3 p.m. every day to find a parent completely incapacitated.
Like from severe depression or substance abuse, right?
Yes. And suddenly, this 9-year-old is basically the head of the household. They are changing dirty diapers for a toddler. They're figuring out how to scratch $5 to make dinner. They're, making sure the doors are locked. They are physically keeping the family alive.
Which is objectively terrifying. But there's this nuance here that really caught my attention in the sources.
Oh, about the farm.
Yes. I was reading this section where one of the psychologists compared this to his own father's upbringing on a working cattle ranch.
Right.
And his dad was driving trucks at age 10. He was waking up at dawn, taking care of livestock. And I thought, well, that sounds like a massive amount of physical responsibility for a kid.
It does sound like it.
But the material specifically argues that the ranch scenario is not parentification. I had to read that twice to wrap my head around the distinction.
It is a vital distinction, and it really comes down to the difference between contribution and exploitation.
Okay, unpack that for me.
So on the ranch, that 10-year-old is contributing to a functional, organized system. They are working alongside competent adults,
The adults are still in charge.
Exactly. The adults are still holding the ultimate responsibility for the family's survival. That kind of culturally appropriate labor actually builds profound self-esteem and competence in a child.
They feel useful in a healthy way.
Right. Instrumental parentification, however, is a void. The child is stepping into an abyss that was left by an adult who has collapsed.
Oh, that's such a striking image.
The child isn't contributing to a system. They are the system. And that is what crushes their development.
That makes total sense. They aren't learning how to be an adult in a safe environment. They are just desperately trying to stave off disaster.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the second type. And this is the one that I think is going to hit a lot of people listening like a freight train today.
Emotional parentification.
Yes. Because you might look back at your childhood and think, wait, my parents were highly functioning professionals. We had a nice house. Dinner was always on the table.
Right, my childhood was fine.
Exactly. So how does a child in a seemingly stable, affluent home become emotionally parentified?
This is really the insidious side of the dynamic, because it leaves no visible bruises and no empty refrigerators.
Everything looks perfect on paper.
Right. In emotional parentification, the child is acting as the emotional regulatory system for the family.
They're managing the feelings.
Yes, they are the surrogate spouse, they're the live-in therapist, the confidant. Their full-time, totally unpaid job is to constantly scan the emotional weather of the household.
And then adjust their behavior to keep the parent's mood from crashing.
Precisely.
The concept of TMI, too much information, is brought up as a huge red flag here in the source material.
It's a massive red flag.
And we aren't just talking about a parent occasionally complaining about, like, a bad day at work or traffic. We are talking about a 12-year-old being used as a sounding board for their mother's marital crises.
Or a father treating his teenager like a best friend and just dumping his deep financial terrors onto them.
Which is wild when you
Yeah.
think about the neurological capacity of a 12-year-old.
Well, their prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for complex processing and emotional regulation, is literally decades away from being fully formed.
Right, they don't have the hardware for it yet.
They really don't. When an adult dumps their existential terrors onto a child, it is fundamentally developmentally inappropriate.
It's just too much data.
The child has no framework to process that information. They are simply being used as a receptacle for the parent's anxiety.
This connects so perfectly to psychologist Alice Miller's work on the gifted child. And I really want to clarify this because when I first heard the phrase gifted child,
You thought of academics.
yes, I instantly pictured a kid winning the spelling bee or, playing Mozart at age 4 or taking advanced calculus in middle school.
Everyone assumes that.
But that's a complete misunderstanding of her theory, isn't it?
Entirely. Alice Miller wasn't talking about IQ or academic achievement at all.
Okay, so what is the gift?
The gift she identified in these children is an intense, almost supernatural emotional sensitivity.
Like a radar.
Yes, exactly like a radar. These kids possess a profound ability to scan their environment, instantly detect the microscopic emotional needs of their caregivers, and then seamlessly mold themselves to meet those needs.
They're psychological chameleons.
But the tragedy of this so-called gift is that the child gets so extraordinarily good at shaping themselves around the parent's unexpressed needs that they completely lose touch with their own internal signals.
Man, I kept thinking of an analogy while I was researching this. Imagine taking an 8-year-old child, putting them in the driver's seat of a car, and forcing them to merge onto a busy 70-mile-per-hour highway.
That is a terrifying image.
Right. And from the back seat, the parent might be saying, wow, look how mature they are. Look how straight they're keeping the car. They're such a good driver.
And the society totally agrees.
Society looks at the car staying in its lane and praises the kid. But inside the car, the kid can barely reach the pedals.
They're terrified.
Their heart is pounding out of their chest. They are operating on pure, unadulterated panic.
That analogy perfectly captures the physiological reality of emotional parentification.
Because they look fine from the outside.
Right. The child might be keeping the car on the road, but the cost to their nervous system is astronomical. An adult driving that car has a fully developed brain, they have emotional regulation skills, and they have life experience to handle a sudden swerve.
The 8-year-old has none of that.
None. They are operating on a constant slow drip of adrenaline and cortisol.
Just constantly redlining.
Exactly. And the most dangerous part of this dynamic is that over time, the child begins to believe that their only value as a human being is their ability to keep that specific car from crashing.
Which begs a massive question. If a child's entire neurological framework is built around being a shock absorber for a parent.
What happens to the child?
Yeah. What is actually happening to their own identity? Like, where does the parent end and the child begin?
It gets very blurry.
I was diving into this concept in the material, this idea of the symbiotic phase. And I realized we have to actually go back to infancy to understand the mechanics of this damage.
We really do. To understand enmeshment, you have to look at normal human development first.
Okay, take us through it.
So, psychologically speaking, a healthy 18-month-old infant has zero ego boundaries. The baby literally cannot conceptualize a difference between itself, its mother, and the rest of the world.
They're just one blob.
They are completely and totally merged. Sigmund Freud actually referred to this as the oceanic feeling of oneness.
Right, because if the baby is hungry, it feels like the entire universe is starving.
Exactly.
If the mother's heart rate spikes because she's anxious about something, the baby's universe is instantly filled with anxiety. There is no me and you. There's just us.
And biologically, this makes perfect sense for an infant, right? It ensures survival.
Sure.
Now, in a healthy developmental arc, as the child grows, the parent actively encourages individuation. They support the child becoming a separate, autonomous being.
They let him walk away.
Exactly. But an emotionally immature, deeply hungry, or narcissistic parent does the exact opposite.
Because they're scared.
Yes. Because they are terrified of abandonment, they unconsciously force the older child back into that infantile state of enmeshment. They recreate the symbiotic phase.
The term Heinz Kohut uses for this in the sources is just chilling. He calls the child a self-object.
It's a very clinical, cold term.
When I first read that, it didn't click, but then I realized what it implies. It means the parent doesn't see a separate human being. They see a psychological prosthetic.
That's a great way to put it. A self-object is a representation of another person that you use to maintain your own psychological equilibrium.
It's about maintenance.
Think about your arm. You don't ask your arm how its day was or if it feels like picking up a glass of water today.
No, I just move it.
Right, you just exert your will and you expect the arm to function as an extension of yourself. That is exactly how the enmeshed parent views the child.
Wow.
The child becomes, in clinical terms, a mental womb for the parent.
A mental womb. That is just so heavy to think about. You aren't just dealing with a difficult parent in the external world.
No, it's inside you.
You are literally carrying their emotional architecture inside your own mind. You are processing their depression so they don't have to. You are digesting their rage.
You are operating as their psychological liver, filtering all their emotional toxins for them.
There was this comparison in the material to quantum mechanics that just blew my mind.
The entanglement metaphor.
Yes, the idea of quantum entanglement. Two particles that become linked so that whatever happens to one instantly affects the other, even if they are light years apart.
It's a brilliant way to describe it.
If you are a child psychologically entangled like that with a parent, how is it even possible to know which emotions belong to you?
That is the defining agony of enmeshment. You don't know.
You just can't tell.
Because you were robbed of the developmental space to build an ego boundary, your internal world is completely colonized.
Colonized, that's a strong word.
When you speak to adults who have survived severe emotional parentification, they describe this exact oceanic fusion.
What does that sound like in practice?
They will say things like, I feel this crushing anxiety today, and I genuinely cannot tell if I am anxious about my own job or if I am feeling the residual anxiety of a phone call I had with my mother 3 days ago.
That is terrifying.
The entanglement is so profound that the adult child just operates as a satellite dish, constantly receiving the parent's frequency.
So let's trace this forward. Because eventually, the kid has to get out of the car.
Right, they grow up.
They leave the house, they go to college, they enter the workforce. But they are carrying this entangled programming with them everywhere they go.
It doesn't just vanish.
Exactly. I want to really dig into the transactional bargain they were forced to make, because it dictates their entire adult life.
The fundamental lie implanted in the parentified child is that love is not a birthright.
It's earned.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love is a currency, and you are inherently bankrupt. You can only earn this currency by being intensely useful.
It's literally a hostage negotiation masquerading as childhood.
That's exactly what it is.
It's like the kid is saying, I will give up my right to be messy, loud, needy, and spontaneous. And in exchange, you will remain emotionally stable and you will give me the breadcrumbs of approval.
And to survive that awful transaction, the human psyche actually has to fracture.
It has to split.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the most elegant way to visualize this fracture, based on the sources, is through a model of 3 concentric circles.
Okay, let's go through them.
The outermost circle is what we call the act, or the false self.
This is the mask.
It is a brilliantly constructed, highly adaptive mask. The false self is the part of you that achieves straight A's, never rocks the boat, anticipates every need in a meeting before the boss even speaks.
And instinctively knows how to diffuse tension in a room before a fight even breaks out.
Exactly. It is highly, highly competent.
I think of it as the ultimate customer service voice, but applied to your entire personality. You are just always on.
Constantly on.
But right underneath that, there's the second circle, which is so much darker. The scared self.
The middle circle, the scared self, is the vault. It is the repository for every single disowned, messy, angry, natural impulse you ever had.
Because you couldn't show them.
Because remember the bargain. You only get love if you are easy and useful. Therefore, if you show anger, if you show fatigue, if you have complex needs, you break the contract.
And if you break the contract, you will be abandoned.
Right. So the scared self holds all of those unacceptable emotions in a state of sheer terror, making sure they never, ever leak out into the false self.
Wow. And then, buried beneath that vault is the inner circle, the true self.
The true self is the spark of your authentic humanity. It is who you actually were before the bargain was violently forced upon you.
Before the car ride.
Exactly. It holds your genuine desires, your spontaneous joy, your true boundaries. But for an adult who has been parentified, that true self is buried under so many layers of concrete.
They can't even access it.
They often feel a profound sense of emptiness. They literally do not know who they are if they aren't actively serving someone else.
Which brings us to a massive paradox here, because if we look at the adult living in the false self, society absolutely loves them.
And society rewards them constantly.
The false self is incredible at capitalism. This is the person who is the emotional housekeeper of their friend group. They are the ones organizing the trips, listening to everyone's problems, never complaining.
They're the rock.
Right. At work, they are the ultimate yes person, taking on 3 extra projects and working until midnight without asking for a raise.
And in romance.
In romance, they are magnetically drawn to what the material calls birds with broken wings.
Yes, the compulsion to rescue.
Because they have to be needed.
Exactly. Because if you find a partner who is chaotic, addicted, or deeply damaged, you get to play your absolute favorite role, the savior.
The fixer.
If you are fixing them, you are indispensable. And if you are indispensable, they can never leave you.
It's all about preventing abandonment. But there is a fatal flaw in this architecture. Alice Miller writes about the twin poles of grandiosity and depression.
This is a crucial concept.
I really want to unpack the mechanics of this because it seems completely contradictory at first glance. How does a highly functional, beloved, successful people pleaser suddenly fall into a catastrophic, depressive episode?
It looks like a contradiction, right? But grandiosity and depression are actually the exact same defense mechanism, just viewed from different angles.
All right, let's look at the grandiosity first.
In this context, grandiosity isn't about walking around bragging about how great you are. It's not narcissism.
And vanity.
No, it is an internalized structural belief. The false self genuinely believes, I have the power to fix everyone.
Right, I can manage my boss's temper.
I can cure my partner's depression. I can keep the entire hanging mobile of my family perfectly balanced. I am uniquely capable.
It's basically a God complex born out of trauma.
Precisely. It is a brilliant survival mechanism. But the fatal flaw is that you are just a human being.
You have limits.
No one can perfectly manage the emotions of everyone around them forever. The system is inherently unsustainable. Eventually, you will drop a ball.
Something will give.
A project will fail, a friend will get mad at you, or a partner will simply refuse to be fixed and will leave you anyway.
The 8-year-old finally crashes the car.
And when the crash happens, the entire psychological structure collapses.
Yeah.
Because the foundational rule of your psyche is, I am only worthy of love if I am flawlessly useful.
Oh, wow.
The moment you fail to be useful, your brain immediately concludes that you are fundamentally unlovable, toxic, and worthless.
And that fall.
That sudden, precipitous free fall is the depressive pull.
It's not just a bad mood. It is the realization that the entire foundation of your life is a lie.
It's ego death.
There's a quote from Alice Miller in the text that is just devastating. She talks about the moment a patient realizes that all the love and adoration they spent their whole life capturing.
Right, it wasn't for them.
Exactly. It wasn't actually for them. The patient asks, what would have happened if I had appeared before you bad, ugly, angry, jealous, lazy? Where would your love have been then?
It is a moment of profound, shattering grief.
I can't even imagine.
Realizing that you have been loved for your performance, not your essence, is truly one of the most painful experiences a human being can endure.
And this brings us to what might be the most frustrating phase of the entire process.
The feeling of being stuck.
Yeah. Because let's say you are listening to this and your logical brain is screaming, yes, I do this. I live in the false self. I see the bargain.
You have the awareness.
Right. But knowing it logically doesn't stop the behavior. If I know putting my hand on a hot stove burns me, I stop touching the stove.
Right.
If I logically know that people-pleasing is destroying my nervous system, why can't I just walk into my boss's office and say no? What is the physical mechanism keeping me trapped?
You are hitting on the exact reason why reading a self-help book is rarely enough to cure trauma.
It's not just a mindset shift.
Not at all. You cannot logic your way out of this because you are fighting a war against what psychoanalysts call introjects.
Introjects. I want to spend some real time here because this concept completely shifted how I view my own inner monologue.
It's a game changer.
What exactly is an introject?
In psychological terms, an introject is a belief, an attitude, or a voice from an external figure, usually a primary caregiver, that you have unconsciously absorbed and integrated into your own mind as if it were your own original thought.
So it's not like an auditory hallucination. I'm not hearing my mother's actual physical voice in the room?
No, it is far more insidious than that. Melanie Klein and other psychoanalysts mapped out this concept of the internalized bad object.
The internalized bad object.
Yes. When you were a child, if your parent constantly signaled to you that setting a boundary was selfish or that expressing anger made you unlovable, your brain recorded those injunctions.
It just taped them.
And over time, those external rules wired themselves into your neural pathways. They formed a coalition inside your mind.
It makes me think of buying a brand new, top-of-the-line laptop. The hardware is perfect. But somewhere along the line, it got infected with malware.
A virus.
Right. And this malicious software is just constantly running in the background, draining the battery, tracking your keystrokes.
Constantly running.
If I try to do something healthy, like open an email to tell my family I'm not coming home for the holidays, the malware immediately overrides the system and flashes a massive red warning on the screen.
Yes. Error. You are a bad person.
Exactly. You are being selfish. They will hate you. You will die alone.
That is a flawless analogy. The introject operates automatically, faster than conscious thought.
So I don't even have a chance to reason with it.
Before your prefrontal cortex can even formulate the word no, your amygdala has already fired, and the internalized bad object has flooded your system with shame.
It feels like me.
It feels exactly like your own voice telling you that you are bad, but it is actually the ghost of your enmeshed parent maintaining control of the system.
Wow. So how do we uninstall the malware? The material brings up cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, as a primary tool here.
CBT is highly effective at uninstalling malware because it treats these voices not as unchangeable truths, but as learned programming.
Like bad code.
Exactly. CBT teaches you to meticulously identify these automatic negative thoughts, these ANTs.
So you have to catch them in the act.
When the voice says, if I say no to this project, I will be fired and ruined, CBT forces you to pause, isolate the thought, and aggressively interrogate it with reality-based evidence.
You interrogate the malware.
You're essentially writing new code to override the virus.
But, and this is a massive but that was highlighted in the research, there is a huge danger in jumping straight into therapy right after escaping a toxic dynamic.
Oh, this is so common.
I read this warning and it terrified me. How can therapy backfire? I thought therapy was the safe zone.
This is one of the most counterintuitive, brilliant insights in the clinical literature. If you walk into a therapist's office while your false self is still heavily running the show, the false self will simply view the therapist as the new parent that needs to be pleased.
Wait, so the malware just adapts to the new environment?
Yes, the false self is a survival machine. It wants to be the best at whatever it does. So it will hijack the therapeutic process.
It games the system.
The internalized voice of the abuser will consume the insights of therapy and use them as camouflage.
Oh my.
You will learn all the modern wellness buzzwords. You will sit in the chair and say, I am holding space for my trauma. I'm setting boundaries. I am regulating my nervous system.
You sound like you are healing. You look like you are healing.
But you are just putting on a highly sophisticated new performance to gain the approval of the therapist.
You're still performing.
You are trying to be their favorite, most self-aware patient. You aren't actually touching the messy, painful reality of the scared self. The Matrix has just generated a new, more comfortable simulation to keep you trapped.
That is incredibly dark. So if the false self can just game the system and use therapy buzzwords as a shield, what does actual healing look like?
It looks a lot less pretty.
Because modern self-help culture on Instagram has really sold us this aesthetic version of healing.
The wellness aesthetic, yes.
It's all matcha lattes, it's journaling in a sunlit room, it's achieving this state of perpetual zen and profound inner peace.
And that aesthetic is a dangerous illusion that actively prevents real recovery.
It keeps you in the false self.
True healing from severe parentification is not a peaceful destination. It is an arduous, physically exhausting, and completely nonlinear teardown of your psychological house.
The material makes a stark, uncompromising point about this. Healing is fundamentally grief work.
Yes, because to heal, you have to mourn a corpse that is completely invisible to the rest of the world.
You're mourning your own childhood.
You have to mourn the childhood you never got to have. You have to grieve the reality that while other kids were learning how to play and make mistakes, you were carrying the emotional weight of adults.
That is so deeply sad.
And even more painfully, you have to let go of what psychologists call the healing fantasy.
The healing fantasy. Let's really dig into this because I think this is the anchor keeping millions of people stuck. What exactly is the fantasy?
The healing fantasy is the deeply buried secret hope that if you just act perfectly enough,
If I just do it right.
if you finally find the exact right combination of words to explain your pain, or if you achieve enough success and wealth, your parent will finally have an epiphany.
They'll wake up.
The fantasy says that one day they will look at you, validate your pain, apologize for everything, and finally give you the unconditional love you always deserved.
It is the fuel that keeps the false self running. It's the carrot on the stick. If I just keep driving this car perfectly, eventually they will let me be a kid.
Letting go of that fantasy feels like a death.
It has to.
It requires accepting a brutal reality. The parent you deserved is never going to arrive.
They just can't do it.
They do not have the capacity. It is what it is, and it was what it was. Surrendering that hope is a devastating, dysregulating process.
And this ties right back into the danger of this modern obsession with nervous system regulation.
The fixation on being calm.
Right. It seems like everywhere you look online, people are absolutely terrified of negative emotions. It's all about, oh, I feel a little triggered. Let me do some box breathing. Let me take an ice bath. Let me immediately return to my window of tolerance.
It's emotional micromanagement.
Are we just using these biohacks to regulate ourselves out of feeling our authentic, messy anger?
You are hitting on a massive critique of modern wellness culture. You cannot perform realization. You must experience
I
it.
have to feel it.
The false self loves the idea of being perfectly regulated all the time because it looks competent and in control. But true healing, accessing that buried inner circle,
Yeah.
sometimes that means allowing yourself to be a complete dysregulated hot mess.
Because if you have been suppressing decades of legitimate, righteous anger and profound grief, it's not going to come out in a perfectly modulated Zen-like whisper.
Think about Freud's concept of the primitive instinctual part of the mind. The human psyche is a wilderness.
It's wild.
It is not logical, and it is not polite. If you're constantly forcing yourself to be calm, collected, and regulated every time a painful memory surfaces, you're just reinforcing the bars on the cage of the false self.
You're just trapping yourself again.
You have to allow the wilderness to bubble up. You have to allow yourself to feel the messy, ugly, disproportionate rage of an abandoned child, even if it feels terrifying.
Okay, but practically speaking, how do we safely allow that mess to happen? Because, I mean, if you just let all that suppressed rage out at the office, you lose your job.
Right, you can't just explode anywhere.
How do we begin reclaiming that authentic identity without blowing up our lives?
This is where we transition into the actionable mechanics of reclaiming your life. And the very first step the experts suggest is surprisingly physical. It's a process referred to as waking down into the body.
Waking down. We always hear about waking up in a spiritual sense, but waking down sounds so grounded. What does it actually mean?
It addresses the somatic reality of trauma. People who have survived extreme emotional parentification often describe feeling entirely numb from the neck down.
Because they live in their heads.
Exactly. Because their environment was so emotionally radioactive, their brain literally severed the connection to the body's sensory inputs to survive. They live entirely in their heads, constantly analyzing data and scanning the room.
So waking down is reversing that.
Waking down means coaxing the nervous system into accepting that it is safe to inhabit a physical form again.
And one of the primary prescriptions for this in the material is spending significant time in nature. Why nature specifically? Why not just, go to a gym or a yoga class?
Because a yoga class still has an audience.
Oh, that makes sense.
There is still a teacher to please or peers to compare yourself to. The false self will just try to be the best at yoga.
Right, you'll perform yoga.
But when you walk into a dense forest or sit by the ocean, you are simply a biological organism within a biosphere. The trees do not require you to manage their anxiety.
The river doesn't need a therapist.
Exactly. The river does not need you to act as its therapist.
The sheer absence of interpersonal demands allows the system to finally power down?
Precisely. When you remove all the human variables that the false self was built to manage, the mask finally drops because there's no one to perform for.
And then what happens?
In that profound quiet, the true self can tentatively begin to step forward and feel the physical sensations of being alive.
That is beautiful. Okay, so we are spending time in the woods. We are feeling our physical bodies again. What is the next mechanical step?
The material mentions a practice called unpacking the bargain.
Unpacking the bargain requires radical, unflinching honesty about the exact trades you were forced to make as a child.
The hostage negotiation.
Right. And a highly effective clinical tool for this is writing unsent letters. The key word being unsent. Because if I know I'm going to mail it, the internal editor, which is just the false self trying to keep me safe, is going to tone down the anger and make it sound reasonable.
Precisely. The unsent letter allows you to bypass the malware entirely.
You don't have to be polite.
You write a letter to your parent or even to your past self, and you express the pure, unvarnished truth of the transaction. You name the trade.
What does that sound like?
I gave up my right to be a child to keep you sober, and in exchange, you gave me a lifelong anxiety disorder. Or, I acted as your marriage counselor so you wouldn't fall apart, and it cost me the ability to know what I actually want out of life.
You just lay it all out.
You have to drag the subconscious contract into the light of day.
But this brings up a fear that I think is incredibly common. I had to sit with this next concept for a while because it felt so counterintuitive to me.
What was it?
If I unpack this bargain and I realize that my intense empathy, my deep care for others, and my hyper-responsibility were all just trauma responses, do I have to stop being an empathetic person?
The fear of losing yourself.
Yeah. Do I have to kill off the best parts of myself because they were built on a toxic foundation?
It is a terrifying thought, but the psychological framework provides a brilliant way out of this trap. They use the analogy of the noble pony versus the naughty pony.
Okay, explain this because I love a good pony metaphor.
When you unpack the trauma, you realize that you develop certain traits for deeply neurotic reasons. That's the naughty pony.
The neurotic engine.
You developed your incredible empathy solely to monitor your father's mood so you could hide before you started drinking. You developed your reliability because if you weren't reliable, the family fell apart. The origin of the trait was a desperate survival tactic.
The engine driving the car was terror.
Exactly. But the trait itself, the capacity for deep empathy, the reliability, the profound emotional intelligence, is pure, wholesome, and virtuous. That is the noble pony.
So you separate the trait from the trauma.
Healing does not mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. You do not have to become cold and unfeeling. Instead, you retain the noble pony, but you discard the neurotic motivation.
You change the why.
You choose to be empathetic now because it aligns with your authentic adult values. Not because you are terrified of being abandoned if you aren't useful. You change the engine, but you keep the vehicle.
That is incredibly liberating. I get to keep my superpowers. I just stop using them to be a hostage negotiator.
Exactly.
Now, speaking of unpacking the past, I want to pivot to a massive trend right now. If you spend 5 minutes on any social media platform, you will see a million videos about diagnosing your toxic parents.
Oh, that's everywhere.
Everyone's ex is a narcissist. Everyone's mom has borderline personality disorder. The question is, do I need to officially label my parent with a DSM code to justify setting boundaries or walking away?
This is a crucial, critical point in the healing journey. The material pushes back heavily against this modern obsession with clinical labeling.
What's the verdict?
The short answer is absolutely not. Labels do not empower you. In fact, they often provide a false comfort that actively retards your healing process.
Really? Because I think for a lot of people, finding that label feels intensely empowering. It feels like, aha, I finally have the secret vocabulary word that explains the madness of my entire childhood.
It feels that way initially, which is exactly why it is so seductive. It taps into a very ancient, almost primitive human belief. If we can learn the true name of a monster, we gain magical power over it.
Right, like Rumpelstiltskin.
But knowing that your parent might meet 7 out of 9 criteria for a narcissistic personality disorder doesn't actually change your physical reality. It is putting the cart before the horse.
How so?
People usually decide they are miserable, drained, and want to leave a relationship long before they start Googling personality disorders. They just use the clinical label to retroactively justify a decision their true self has already made.
So we are essentially just seeking a doctor's note to give us permission to feel bad about how we were treated.
Yes. And the experts offer a fascinating critique of the DSM, the American Diagnostic Manual, in this regard.
What's their issue with the DSM?
The argument is that the DSM is overly focused on putting human beings into rigid, often commercially driven boxes. The material advocates instead for the approach of the ICD, the International Manual, which focuses less on rigid labels and more on traits and dysfunction.
So instead of spending 100 hours researching whether your mother technically qualifies as a covert narcissist, you should just look at the actual traits playing out in your living room.
Look at the behavior.
Is she consistently antagonistic? Is she emotionally dysregulated? Does she make you feel completely drained, anxious, and hollowed out every single time you interact with her?
Precisely. Focus on the mechanics of the dysfunction, not the label. If you feel terrible around someone, if a relationship requires you to suppress your authentic self just to survive a Sunday dinner, you do not need a psychiatric label to justify walking away.
You just need to acknowledge your own feeling.
Acknowledge your own misery. The danger of obsessing over diagnosing the abuser is that it keeps all of your life energy focused outward, on them.
You're still managing them.
True healing requires turning that massive spotlight inward onto you.
Okay, so let's walk through the reality of doing exactly that. You turn the energy inward, you wake down into your body, you unpack the toxic bargain, you keep the noble pony, and you finally decide it is time to set a real hard boundary with your enmeshed family.
The big moment.
You are going to stop playing your assigned role. Let's talk about the fallout, because the system is going to fight back, isn't it?
It absolutely will, and you have to be clinically prepared for it. Families operate as homeostatic systems, like a thermostat.
They want to maintain the temperature.
When you change your behavior, you put immense pressure on all the other pieces of the system to change, and human beings generally despise change. The behavioral psychology term for what happens next is an extinction burst.
Extinction bursts. What does the mechanism of an extinction burst actually look like when you say, tell your mom you aren't coming over to Sunday dinner anymore?
Imagine a rat in a cage that has learned to press a lever to get a food pellet. If you disconnect the lever so no food comes out, the rat doesn't just immediately walk away.
Right, it doesn't just shrug and leave.
No, the rat panics. It presses the lever faster, harder, and more aggressively. It bites the lever. That is an extinction burst.
Yeah. Wow.
When you stop playing the family peacemaker or the emotional sponge, your family's toxic behavior will initially escalate dramatically. They will double down.
They bite the lever.
They will argue louder, try to drag you into drama more aggressively, or launch guilt trips that are twice as intense as anything they've done before.
They are trying to apply maximum psychological pressure to force you back into your designated box because your new behavior is deeply threatening to their equilibrium.
It's terrifying for them.
And if you are that highly sensitive parentified kid, that pressure feels like literal life or death. It triggers the exact same neurological terror you felt when you were an 8-year-old driving the car.
Exactly. And this leads right into the most dangerous phase of the fallout, what the clinicians call the compassion trap.
The compassion trap.
Because you possess that intense, gifted emotional sensitivity, you can acutely, physically feel the distress you are causing your family by changing the rules.
You still have the radar.
And they know this. Consciously or unconsciously, they will weaponize your empathy against you. They will play the victim, they will cry, they will show extreme distress, banking on the fact that your false self will fold just to relieve their pain.
It makes me think of a family as one of those giant hanging mobiles you see in an art museum.
That's a great visual.
You have all these distinct shapes, perfectly balanced on thin wires. If you take a pair of scissors and snip just one string, the entire mobile goes crazy. It spins out of control, flailing wildly, trying to find a new center of gravity.
It's chaos.
It takes immense, almost superhuman fortitude to stand there and watch the mobile flail around without rushing in to fix it.
It takes tremendous courage. And practically speaking, surviving this extinction burst requires highly strategic physical boundaries.
What kind of boundaries?
The experts note that if you are going to visit a highly enmeshed family and try to hold a new boundary, you cannot rely on willpower alone. You need absolute physical autonomy.
Right, the pragmatic logistics of escaping the box. The material mentioned having your own rental car, your own credit cards, and staying in a motel rather than sleeping in your childhood bedroom.
Yes, because you need the physical ability to leave the exact moment the extinction burst becomes abusive or intolerable.
You need an escape hatch.
If you rely on them for transportation, or if you are sleeping under their roof, you are trapped in the pressure cooker. Your nervous system knows there is no escape hatch, which makes it infinitely harder to hold the boundary.
But I want to throw a curveball here because the material brought up a possibility that absolutely blew my mind.
About the mobile.
Yes. What if you snip the string on the mobile, you brace yourself for the massive explosion, you get the rental car, you book the hotel, your heart is pounding out of your chest as you set the boundary.
And nothing happens.
Yes. What if they don't even really notice that you've stopped playing the role?
This is one of the most profound, staggering realizations a recovering person can experience. Sometimes you gear up for World War III, you set a boundary, you drop the rope, you stop doing the emotional labor, and the parent just says, okay, fine.
Or they don't even register the change in the dynamic at all.
Right.
Which is almost more painful in a strange way, right?
Yeah.
Because it reveals how much of the prison was being maintained in your own head.
It is a devastating but liberating revelation. It shows how much of the dynamic was being actively maintained by your own internal act.
It was the malware running.
It reveals that the overarching narrative you constructed to survive, the belief that they will literally die if I don't help them, or I will be completely destroyed if I displease them, was a ghost story.
A ghost story.
It was a story you were telling yourself based on outdated data from when you were a helpless child. Realizing that the cage door has been wide open this entire time is the final step in moving from a top-down, restricted existence dictated by the false self to a bottom-up, grounded, authentic life.
Oh. Okay, let's take a breath and zoom out. We have covered an immense amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started by defining the crushing neurological weight of parentification, specifically the emotional role reversal that turns a gifted, sensitive child into a trauma manager.
The old soul.
Right. We dove into the deep clinical waters of the symbiotic state, understanding what it means to carry a parent in a mental womb and exist in quantum entanglement with their anxiety.
We examine the transactional bargain that creates the false self, mapping out the three circles of the psyche.
The act, the scared self, and the true self.
And unpacking why the mask of high competency eventually fractures into the devastating twin poles of grandiosity and depression.
The inevitable crash.
We confronted the internal battlefield of introjects, the malware of the mind, and the painful reality that true healing requires giving up the fantasy and doing the messy grief work.
And finally, we explored the actual mechanics of reclaiming your life. Waking down into the physical body, untangling the noble pony from the neurotic trauma response, dropping the obsession with clinical labels, and pragmatically surviving the inevitable extinction bursts when you finally change the rules of the game.
It is a lifelong journey of dismantling the performance of a lifetime. But the structural changes to your life are worth the pain of the demolition.
So we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your week.
Think about the energy.
Yeah, if your false self was this incredibly elaborate, high-effort, exhausting performance you put on just to survive, a performance that required constant hypervigilance, emotional regulation, and managing the feelings of everyone in the room.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Imagine what incredible, untapped energy will flood into your life when you stop spending 90% of your mental battery performing for an audience of ghosts.
Exactly. When you are no longer acting as the shock absorber for the world, all of that hijacked neurological energy returns to you.
It's all yours again.
The question you have to ask yourself is, who could you become with all that reclaimed power?
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take a deep breath, grant yourself permission to step out of the act, and introduce yourself to the true self waiting underneath.